August is here, and that means that the weather and the election cycle are heating up. The best way to beat the heat and stay up to date on the latest news from the US election to international breaking headlines is to become a DSR member and gain access to additional content across our network, in addition to other exclusive benefits. Use code BEATTHEHEAT to get 50% off of your membership and sign up today at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's Beat the Heat at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Now please enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. At the Democratic Convention in Chicago, one speaker after another has warned Democrats not to get too complacent about a Kamala Harris victory over Donald Trump. Barack and Michelle Obama, along with Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, all issued such a warning. So did other Democrats. Clearly, Dems remember the shock of 2016, and fairly or not, Hillary Clinton's campaign got blamed for complacency about Trump. Dems are clearly determined to avoid this pitfall. But something subtle is going on here. Democrats are keeping complacency at bay, but without letting Trump balloon into a psychologically frightening figure in their minds. The secret sauce may be that Dems are going into this election with the correct level of guarded confidence. They're acting like they know beating Trump is going to be brutally hard, but also acting like they know he can be beaten. This, I think, really explains why Trump seems to be a shrinking, diminished figure these days. Today we're talking about all this with Brian Beutler, who has a good piece going up on his Substack Friday explaining why this balance is proving effective. Great to have you back on the show, Brian.
It's great to be back with you.
Okay, Brian, before we get to the Democratic strategy, we've seen all week that Trump's getting crazier and crazier. He unleashed this vile anti-Semitic rant about Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He's reportedly irritated by the Democratic Convention's frequent references to Project 2025. He's ranted wildly about the Obamas and publicly blamed his advisors for constraining him, as if Harris's surge in the polls can be blamed on the failure to go even more gutter MAGA against her. He's vowed more personal attacks to come. What do you think accounts for Trump's highly destabilized state right now?
That he's Donald Trump. I mean, I think that the Democrats have gotten better and a little defter over the years at triggering him in ways that will make him do counterproductive things. Two things. One is that an opportunity like this to hold a presidential nominating convention doesn't come around very often. So it's rare to get 4 straight days of roadblock news coverage where the other party doesn't really have a great opportunity to compete with you or counter-program you. So that's part of it. He's not getting a lot of attention, and that drives him nuts. But Democrats have kind of adopted a new rhetorical approach to opposing him that I feel like has evolved over the years from 2016, where they more or less held him in contempt and thought he was essentially a self-discrediting figure, that you didn't have to put a ton of spin on the ball to make people understand why they didn't want him to be president. Then in 2020, it was this sort of fear, that this is the democracy might not survive if he gets 2 terms. And they still, I think, worry about what's going to happen to democracy if Trump wins, obviously. But come 2024, the new bent is a little bit more like this guy, this clown. And in addition to, I think, casting him in a better light as far as voters are concerned, it's good to remind voters that Donald Trump is a clown, right? He's not a boardroom executive. He was not a successful president. He's a highly eccentric figure. But it also gets under Trump's skin, and it makes him lash out.
Brian, about your piece, you do write that Dems are determined to exercise the ghost of 2016. Dems, of course, beat Trump in 2020. and largely won in 2018 and 2022, even though that seems to disappear from our discourse on a daily basis. But on some level, Dems still do suspect that another 2016 shocker is still a real possibility. As you write, Michelle Obama said this is still going to be an uphill battle. Barack Obama said Dems still have to listen carefully to what undecided voters are saying. And Tim Walz gave an actual coach's pep talk to the team, saying we're down a field goal. But Brian, it seems to me this is more than just kind of going through the usual motions a campaign does to keep its people energized and in the game, right? There's something more purposeful going on here, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. In normal circumstances, I think any campaign is going to be torn between these two competing imperatives. One is projecting confidence, building a lead and then acting like your lead is appropriate. Of course, you're ahead. You're the better ticket, and that you should go into the election confident, right? Like, people like to be part of a winning team, and so if you act like you're winning, people are gonna be drawn to you, right? But on the other hand, there's this risk that, let's say you go into the election winning, you've pulled all these people in because they like being part of a winning program, and then whatever, it's raining in Wisconsin, and they're like, some people are like, well, I don't need to go to the polls. They've got this in the bag, and the weather's too bad. I can't be bothered. Like, you don't want to accidentally instill too much confidence in your supporters, because you need everyone to act as if it's a 50-50, it's like a jump ball.
When Harris's people, when the Obamas say this stuff, when Walz says it, what are they trying to do? It's more complicated than the usual dance, isn't it?
I think so. I think that I see them consciously or subconsciously thinking through all the ways what Harris has managed to build over the course of a month could come apart, could collapse.
Right.
So she's gone from it's hard to Democrats or Biden Harris or whatever being down probably 3 to 4 points and trending downward to being up 3 to 4 points and trending upward. And that's remarkable, right? Like, that's a huge turnaround, but it's not.
Right. There's a kind of pinch me, I must be dreaming dynamic here a little.
There's that.
Nobody believes it can be authentic.
Well, and there's that. There's also the fact that as of right now, 3 to 4 points is good. It's enough to win an election in most cases, but it's not huge. So we don't know where that's going to top out.
Right.
But they also know that complacency on the one hand and demoralization on the other hand can affect, whether the polling stays stable or not, can affect what happens when it comes time for people to vote. And so I saw Bill Clinton, Michelle Obama, you mentioned Tim Walz, Barack Obama, to all kind of dancing around all these different ways things could maybe go south. That maybe at some margin, some part of the coalition won't be there the way they seem to be there in the polls, and that we're going to wake up Wednesday morning after the election and Trump will have won. And so part of it is like, like what you said, pinch me. Like, you have to treat this like it's a 50-50 coin flip election, right? On the one hand. On the other hand, let's say Republicans get their propaganda machinery whirring again, and start fixating on a thing about Kamala Harris that starts really driving like national discourse. Don't let that get into your head and demoralize you. Like, they found the secret sauce to defeat her, right? Like, remember that all these things are in some level deceitful, right? Like, that's generally how the Republican smear machine works.
Right. Don't get spooked.
Right. And then Obama's line was about not letting the rightful certainty, I think, the Democrats have that Harris should win this election, lure them into talking about the election in a way that puts off people who are cross-pressured about who to vote for. That at the end of the day, she needs a certain number of swing voters to beat Donald Trump, and the next 2 months you can't get so confident in it that you start only talking to people who already agree with you.
I think the tone of Democrats is really interesting right now. We keep hearing the words joy or the phrase good vibes, and those things are, I think, real. But underneath that is something kind of nuanced, right? I think Dems are going into this knowing how hard it is, yes, but also feeling genuinely good about the state of the party and its capacity for beating Trump, right? I mean, note that Walz said we're on offense right now, even if we're down a field goal. They're not down a field goal, right? Yeah. I think that they're up a field goal, but whatever. The coach says that the team is down a field goal, whatever. And then he says, we're on offense right now and we have a damn good team, meaning Democrats. And it seems to me that they're really trying to strike this balance quite deliberately. It seems thought through to me very carefully.
Yes. I mean, after Joe Biden dropped out of the race, there was this immediate groundswell of support to Harris. And it allowed everyone in the party who has a bright future and who was like excited to beat Donald Trump to come out and shine. And I think that to some extent, like Harris and Walz both, and then obviously the speakers at the convention are trying to harness that, right? Like Democrats are very capable of becoming demoralized, of feeling like things are hopeless, and then letting that be reflected in the way they campaign. The farm team or the team or whatever you want to call it was no different when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket. You're talking about the same cast of characters, and they were not winning the election, right? And I mean, that is ultimately about Biden and his limitations as an 81-year-old person, but it's not like Tim Walz and Josh Shapiro and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton were crushing it when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket. They were distraught. They were really worried about what was going to happen, and it bled into how they and everyone else in the party talked about the election, campaigned, tried to raise money, and then it all changed. And what Walz was doing there is I think trying to remind people that like the talent that we bring to this, the abilities that we bring to that are inherent to who we are, and we can kind of maintain this momentum even if things start to go bad, right? And like presumably they won't start to go as bad as they were when Biden was at the top of the ticket, but it's not guaranteed that they're going to have this same kind of forward momentum in 30 days.
Right.
Maybe Harris loses the debate and then people have they worry,
major freak out.
Yeah, like that happened when Obama debated Mitt Romney in 2012. There was a big dip in the polls. Romney and Gallup, I believe, took the lead for a week or two. And there was no reason for Democrats then or Democrats now to radically change the way they approached the election just because they had a setback. And I think that's essentially what he was saying. It's like, we have a good team and we need to keep that in mind for when the other team finds its footing.
Okay, so I want to ask you about this guarded confidence and where it comes from. I'm going to suggest an idea. I think it has something to do with the democratic theory of this election on some level. Trump is a tired figure that majorities of the country want to move past. The anti-MAGA coalition is a real thing, as you talked about. It's proven itself to be there again and again. And I think this is critical. There's something kind of spent about the Republican attack machine, right? As long as you and I have been following politics, that attack machine has been assumed to be very formidable. It can mow down anything in its path. But Democrats just aren't acting frightened of it. And I think this might be why. I think it's because Democrats know that majority is there for the taking if they just get it right, if they can rally it properly. Partly because of Dobbs, right? Partly because of anti-Trump fervor and fatigue, and partly because this just isn't a moment of conservative hegemony where triangulation's the only way out. I mean, Democrats can win the argument, and they are acting like it.
Yes, I think the main problem Republicans have is the Trump problem that you alluded to. Like, he's never had majority support, and now people are tired of the shtick on top of it, right? And under those conditions, there are a lot of people in the country who might, under different circumstances, see the kinds of attacks that Republicans have been experimenting with against Harris and against Walz and think, maybe that's something that I ought to keep an eye on, or it, plants a little seed of doubt about her, him, the ticket, or the party. Under the prevailing conditions with Trump as the top of the ticket and an election in 75 days, that's just not working. And it's hard to see how it would work absent Trump becoming a very different figure all of a sudden. And we know he's not capable of that. The second part of it is that I think that we're seeing that the Republican propaganda machine, it takes time for the people who run it to figure out how to deploy it in ways that are effective when the targets change. But I do wonder if there is going to be a bit of propaganda fatigue, because when Trump said, if Biden wins, all your 401ks are going to be wiped out and it's going to be like 1929 all over again, another Great Depression. Well, that didn't happen. And he's saying it again. And it's like, at some point, the attacks are so overwrought and extreme, and then they don't result in any, they don't bear out at all. That if that's the only frequency on which the propaganda machine can run, that people are just going to be like, whatever, man, you guys are so full of shit. I would like to think that there's a critical part of the electorate outside of the Democratic base, which is obviously very just rejects everything that comes out of Fox News and everywhere else, that will tire of it. That the way Republicans do information in the Trump era is so untrustworthy and gross and clearly manipulative that they will stop being swayed by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reasonable chance that will happen with enough swing voters. And it just seems to me that the sort of kind of shattering of the illusion of formidableness on the part of both Trump and the Republican attack machine is really a key thing here, right? I mean, we've talked about this before, but a hallmark of authoritarian and autocratic politics is to create fear in the opposition, the sense that resistance is futile, the movement is too big and formidable to be resisted, its propaganda is too powerful and kind of all-consuming. But the second that illusion is dispelled, Trump just kind of shrinks rapidly, right? And once Biden was cleared out of the way, right, Biden was kind of this wet blanket on everything that created this impression that he was unbeatable and that their propaganda was, unstoppable. But, it's just like a balloon popping almost, or like a shriveling that happened. You know what I'm talking about? He just seems to have shrunk.
Yeah, so I think some of it is he's older now and he's slower, and he doesn't leave his houses very much. He's not doing he's not campaigning aggressively the way he did in 2016 and in 2020 through COVID. I mean,
he's probably spending more time
Trump
on the toilet, honestly.
There's theorizing about whether he's got PTSD from the assassination attempt. Maybe.
Yeah.
Then there's the role the Democrats played. That Tim Walz and branding MAGA is they are weird, and what they're trying to do to the country is weird, and we should reject it on those terms. And it got people kind of laughing at Trump and his retinue, right? And I compared it in an article to the fall of Ceausescu, or that's not literally what's happening, but you could imagine a world where just becoming an object of ridicule brings Donald Trump down in a way that he can't recover from. And that may be happening. I'm not certain, but that's more or less what happened in Romania with Nicolae Ceausescu. But there's a third thing, which is that Trump had major setbacks in 2016, major setbacks in 2020, but he was always able to fuel himself with invective and agitprop and just deceitful smears about his opponents, right? So,
and media complicity.
Yeah. Well, they when they see him getting his feet under him, they start pursuing, because suddenly the story's interesting and he's on the attack again. But in 2016, he had Hillary Clinton's emails. He had the deplorables thing. He had these things that he could latch onto to fuel days and days and days worth of rhetoric and drive news cycles much longer than Democrats were able to. And similarly in 2020, unsuccessfully, obviously, but he had Hunter Biden. There were things that animated him, like helped him fuel his campaign. And starting in 2024, same thing. In fact, he was like so confident in his ability to beat Joe Biden that he kind of slowed things down. But now with Harris, he doesn't have that. They're obviously looking for it. Like, what is emails but for Kamala Harris? And hopefully he doesn't find it before the election. But I think the absence of a clear cudgel, like a thing that is not just like helping him rally his supporters, but drawing the attention of people in the middle and people in the media, generating, hearings in Congress, whatever it happens to be. Like, the absence of that is making it so that he's kind of like running on fumes. And so those three things combined, I think, are why he seems so diminished at this moment.
Do you think the balance is right here, that basically if they kind of go down this path that they've struck here, that they really have a pretty decent shot of pulling it out?
Oh yeah, I mean, if the election were held today, I think she'd win. And it's hard to compare dynamics that have prevailed in past elections with this one, because the switch out with Biden is so unprecedented, and her rise in the polls has been so meteoric over the last month that you normally assume that after a convention like this, she would get a bump. And I think it's quite possible. I think it's also possible that the bump was kind of built into the surge she's already had, and
yes,
so
absolutely
we won't
possible.
see it. And then that could be something that like instills seeds of doubt in the minds of some Democrats, and that was the sort of thing that Michelle Obama was trying to warn people off of. But even if she gets no bounce out of it, she'll still be 4 or 5 points ahead, and that's enough to win. And like, it's much easier to husband a lead than it is to build one at this point. So I think that, like, in that sense, yes, like you would never say that the election is cooked, but she's going to be in a really, really commanding position if that happens. And the note that they found to run on now, that I think Tim Walz gets a lot of credit for, is really important, but it's particularly important because of how we came to this point. There was a lot of talk in 2020 about, I think, like, based on overly simplistic, pseudoscientific reading of data, that Joe Biden was the strongest possible candidate to run against Donald Trump in the general election because of various head-to-head polls showing him maybe running a point or two ahead of people like Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker and others. I think that was basically name recognition, and that Joe Biden's age, his like inability to campaign vigorously, has actually been a wet blanket on Democrats for 3.5 years. And it was the removal of that wet blanket that did most of the work to bring everyone back in and get them excited again. He just didn't have the vigor that naturally attracts this kind of enthusiasm. And so the reframing of the election around like the beatability of Trump is to try to, without saying that this was a Joe Biden problem and we don't have it anymore, was to dispel any sense that people had developed over the last 3.5 years that Donald Trump was a more fearsome competitor than we realized. Donald Trump was benefiting from being up against Joe Biden, and that was it. And I think a lot of people, when it was time to make the transition, were worried that Harris was going to have all the same problems Biden did. She was just as unpopular as Biden. The head-to-head polls didn't look good. And look, it turned out that all of that was crap. And you don't want to go out and say, well, like, of course we're doing better now. The old guy's gone and things are returning to the way they naturally should be. I think that's what's happening. But I think what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris and the rest of the Democrats speaking at the convention are trying to do is give Democrats a way of understanding their current position as the like natural output of a race between Harris and Donald Trump, right? That like they should not reflect on how tense they felt over the last year and a half or so with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket, and tell themselves that that means that Donald Trump is actually this very indomitable figure. He never has been, and all it took was the shakeup of the race to prove it.
Absolutely right, and that's what's shrinking him, I think. Brian Beutler, it's always awesome to have you on, man.
It's always great to be with you.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.